What is up, everybody? I am HoopsandHipHop, and welcome back to another episode of the Pokeblock Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about some interesting developments that may or may not be happening with the Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation because there's just been a lot of interesting things going on as it relates to stuff for Pokemon that's coming out this year and things that have affected it and all that good stuff. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. I do want to mention, though, before we get into the podcast, I kind of touched on it last week, but now I checked it beforehand, so I know today is officially the day, because this episode marks our 1-year anniversary of the Pokeblock Podcast and me doing podcasts over here on UCast Studios. As this is the 52nd episode, I do one a week, and I haven't missed a week, so this is the year mark, which is really, really crazy. It does not feel like I've been doing this for a year. It doesn't even necessarily feel like I've done 52 episodes, so I'm just really grateful for the opportunity, grateful I'm still around here, and grateful for UCast Studios for keeping me on. It really means a lot. So with that out of the way, there are a couple more people I do need to thank, and that, of course, is our sponsors who also help us keep going and just support us, and we just love them to death. So, with that being said, today's episode is brought to you by the Tax Defense Group. Did you know that in order to get your stimulus check, you had to have filed your taxes for the 2019 or 2018 tax year? If you haven't filed your 2018 or 2019 taxes, there's good news. The Tax Defense Group can rush e-file your taxes. They know that millions of Americans are struggling, and they want to make sure you get your stimulus check sooner rather than later. Call the Tax Defense Group today at 800-850-7973 to get started. That number again is 800-850-7973, and you can visit them online at thetaxdefensegroup.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Writer Junkie. Due to the global pandemic and economic downturn, Writer Junkie is offering their resume writing service for only $100. And with a 3-day turnaround, you cannot beat that price and delivery time. So call Writer Junkie today at 805-587-7966, and you can visit them online at writerjunkie.com. Mention that you heard this ad on UCast Studios, and they will get right to work. So, the topic that I wanted to talk about concerning Pokemon today, as you might be able to tell based on the title of this podcast, is the Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion, specifically the first part, the Isle of Armor, is it going to get delayed because of the current global situation that's going on? It's a very, very interesting question to ask, and what makes it so interesting is that there's all signs, in my opinion at least, would point towards the fact that yes, it would be delayed because, first off, you've got there have been so many things that have been canceled or postponed or whatever, even outside of video games, just in life in general because of what's going on in the world. So it would make sense based on that, first off. Second off, it also would make sense just based on the fact that there's actually been a lot of Pokemon-related things that have had to be either canceled or postponed. I don't really follow the competitive side of things or the TCG or whatever, but a lot of tournaments and events related to competitive Pokemon, whether it be TCG or video games or whatever, those have all been canceled, postponed, so there's that. But more importantly, there's a lot of anime-related stuff that's been postponed. You have the main Sword and Shield anime, Pokemon Journeys, that's currently airing in Japan right now, or it was, and about a couple weeks ago, they essentially stalled on uploading new episodes and are just running reruns every week until further notice. They haven't even given a date as to when they are going to resume new episodes, which they could do. It's not a matter of, they just reached the end of a season or something and they're just kind of in between seasons. They have new episodes to release, they're just postponing it because of what's going on. So that's very interesting. And then just a couple days ago, I believe it was earlier this week even, we got news that the Pokemon the movie Coco, which is the new Pokemon movie coming out this year, and it was supposed to come out in July in Japan. That was effectively delayed as well. I don't believe they gave a new date on that as to when it's going to be, but that's been delayed. And that's a key one to think about. We're going to come back to that when we start talking about the games, but that is a key one to think about. So that's been delayed as well. And then finally, we just got news, I believe it was yesterday, the day before, just super recently, that even the most recent episode of Pokemon Twilight Wings, which was supposed to premiere sometime this month in May, has also been delayed. As of right now, for the Japanese version, it sounds like it's being delayed to June 5th. So only like a 2-week delay, not that big a deal. But considering these are just like 6-minute episodes, they're not even that big of a thing. Like, it's really like they're cool and awesome, but they're not really that big a deal. So to even have that delayed is kind of it raises your eyebrows. It makes you pay attention a little bit. Now, if we take a look back at the movie again, because I mentioned that was important, the reason why it is important is because it was delayed and it was scheduled to come out in July. Now, this is very, very interesting because it actually lines up pretty closely to when the very first expansion was supposed to come out for Sword and Shield. The Isle, I keep getting them confused. The Isle of Armor, which is set to come out first, was set to come out by the end of June. They have not given us a concrete release date as of yet. Probably pretty smart at this point to do that, but it was supposed to come out by the end of June. And that's literally like, I mean, if you count exact days and assume that the Isle of Armor would come out basically around the end of June, because when they usually say by the end of June, they're usually doing that to give themselves that month of time to work on stuff. So probably end of June is when it is slated or was originally slated or whatever. And then we had the movie that was July 15th, I believe. So that's a 2-week window. And if they're delaying something that's 2 weeks like later, then between everything else that's also got delayed as well, I think it's legitimately, I think it's a legitimate concern, or it's legitimately a threat that the Sword and Shield expansion could get delayed as well. And I think they could even be more inclined to delay it just based on the fact they haven't announced a release date just past a month window. So that's very, very interesting. I don't suspect that the second part would get delayed, or for very long at least, because it was scheduled to come out in the fall, and I think it would have enough room to figure itself out while the world figures itself out and like kind of recovers and everything, to where it would be just fine. Or if it did get delayed, I think it would only get delayed because the Isle of Armor got delayed. Maybe in a hypothetical situation, you could have Isle of Armor delayed to fall, and then Crown Tundra, fittingly, would get delayed to winter. That could happen. But if it is a very significant delay, the other thing you have to consider is the fact that if that were to happen, would it affect any future projects or the scheduling of any future projects that are going on at Game Freak? And this is actually a pretty huge big deal, because next year is Pokemon's 25th anniversary. And if the 20th anniversary is anything to go by, which realistically is not even as big of a deal as the 25th anniversary. 25th is that's a quarter of a century. That's the big milestone right there. So, if the 20th anniversary is anything to go by, where they went absolutely crazy, they did so many promotions, so many things. It was capped off by the release of Sun and Moon. If that's anything to go by, the 25th anniversary is going to be just as big, if not bigger. And they're going to have a new game for that. There's no way they're not going to have a new game for that, in addition to any other specials or anything else they do. So with everything that they most assuredly have planned for next year, if there's a couple different ways that it could really get mucked up, and it's really like I'm speaking from the other side of a drawn curtain or a closed door, so I'm just purely speculating because I have no idea how far along they are on these projects or what, but just kind of analyzing what I can analyze here. The situation is such that if the expansions are to get delayed, which we're supposed to be taken care of this year and even be taken care of by the fall of this year, if those were to get delayed, they would be pushed back. If they're pushed back, schedule-wise, it kind of inevitably, whether it's through just like releasing stuff or whether it's because they've got to spend this extra time working on it because things have been slowed down, obviously, because of the situation, that inevitably could push other things back for next year. And with next year being so critical in terms of just like what is set to release and the huge amount of stuff that is inevitably set to release, it's going to make you wonder if it's going to affect next year's 25th anniversary too. Not in terms of like, obviously, not in the same sense in terms of just like what's going on now still going on next year, because cross our fingers that won't be happening, but just in terms of just like a domino effect of things getting delayed and everything having to be pushed back because now they're spending extra time on the expansion, so now they're going to have to spend more time on the stuff for 2021 and the 25th anniversary when they were expecting to have that wrapped up. So it's kind of just like a domino effect or a potential domino effect that could kind of mess things up. And whatever it is, like I suspect that, once again, it's hard to say what, if anything, they have planned. I mean, they obviously have stuff planned, but what they have planned for 2021 and how far along it is, it's hard to say that. We know it's in the works, whatever it is. I think personally it's going to be Diamond and Pearl remakes just because it lines up. That would be a really good 25th anniversary thing. But it's hard to say how far along they really are. And I kind of feel like that is the main question here that really is the determining factor in all of this, you could say, because if we go back to the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra themselves, and really ask, is this going to get delayed? Well, if we look at kind of what everything else is in Pokemon that's getting delayed versus this, it does have a couple advantages. First off, with all of the trading card game competitive stuff, that's obviously in-person tournaments with heavy crowds, so it just makes sense that those would get canceled, so that's kind of a no-brainer. The anime stuff is sort of a similar situation because while it's obviously like on TV and in some cases they already have episodes to release and stuff like that, for the movie specifically, that's a movie that would be in theaters, at least in Japan anyway, and the theaters are I don't know the situation in Japan or how bad it is, but that would obviously cause large crowds to gather, which would not necessarily be a good thing right now. So that can't be done, and so that makes sense as to why that would be closed off or whatever. The main advantage that Sword and Shield expansion has is that not only is it's not going to draw any type of event per se that is going to attract large crowds, it's also not anything that you have to leave your house for, because the only way it could really draw a large crowd is if it was like a pre-order launch party or something like that. But the reason why that's not going to happen is because this is not a game release, this is an expansion release. And since it's an expansion release, it's exclusive to digital because it's just downloadable content. So no one's going to be going out to get the expansion. They're just going to download it from their home. So that is actually the ideal thing to actually stay on track in this kind of situation, because you literally stay home and you can't go out to get it. You have, like, it's literally all at home. It's all on your Switch. It's all through the internet. So you have to stay home to download it. And in that sense, it absolutely could release on time and we could be fine. But there are some other factors that could potentially mess things up, and I'm going to get into them right after I give another quick shout out to our lovely sponsors, the Tax Defense Group. Be sure to check them out. 800-850-7993 is the number. Tax Defense Group, thetaxdefensegroup.com is the website, and be sure to check out Writer Junkie. Call them 805-587-7966 is the number. You can visit them online at writerjunkie.com. They will help you out. They'll get you set up with whatever you need. But the other thing that could potentially derail the expansion, even though it's more of an ideal thing to stay on track during this situation, is the workflow of Game Freak and how it's being developed and at what stage it's at. And there's a lot of different factors because I know nothing about the situation in Japan, but via the excellent man himself, or the monster himself, I should say, Arlo, fellow YouTuber Arlo, he has reported on kind of like the effects of this situation in Japan specifically a couple times, and he has mentioned in his videos that Japan is actually affected more than the United States is, for instance, with this, because they do much more person-to-person contact with their work. They're more traditional and like old-fashioned, I guess, when it comes to their day-to-day work and stuff like that. Their jobs, they like to be in person. They like to work face-to-face. So they are not as apt to deal with the quick change where we all just hurry and switch to remote working and work via FaceTime or whatever the case may be. They're not as prepared for that, so they're getting hit harder when it comes to their work being stopped to the point where they can't work at all. They don't have another option because they're not prepared for it. So if that is the case, then obviously that is one way that the development of the expansion pass could be slowed to the point where it would need to be delayed, because not only would they have to spend the time to set up some kind of remote working, and remote working on games is even more difficult because it's not like you can just go to your home computer, install Skype or Zoom as the kids are using now, and talk with your coworkers via video chat, and that gets your work done. No, that's not how it works. We're making these games with high-end PCs. We're using game development programs. We're using 3D modeling programs. We're using art programs. We're using high-end animation programs. Like, there's a lot of like high-end, like beefy, heavy-duty type of programs and equipment that goes into developing a game. And it's not like you're gonna just be able to have all of that at your house. You could technically take it to your house, but I don't think they are gonna want to move that equipment just so you can work from home, especially with apparently how they're more traditional with the work environment and everything. So developing a game is probably a lot more difficult to transition from work to home than something else might be, just because you've got everything you need to work in the office, and it's not like it's the kind of stuff you need isn't easy to replicate at home. So that could be one potential issue. Another issue that unfortunately happened, this was a few weeks ago, but someone that works at Game Freak actually tested positive for the coronavirus. I don't know a lot of the details on the situation. I want to say that they had when all this was starting, they had acted quickly and they'd kind of like shut down office work and everything was very minimal. So like there isn't really a chance of further infection from what I remember about the story. But basically someone was working, I believe someone was actually in the office. They were alone, but they had been working in the office at one point when they had the coronavirus. So not only do you have an employee who got infected, you also have you also have the fact that they were at the office. They were at the office when they were infected. So that obviously causes a bunch of different issues, because now the office itself is potentially infected, and I'm sure they had to go in and like deep clean everything. They've probably taken care of that by now, to be honest, because this story came from a few weeks ago, so that's more or less probably taken care of. But it's still like it's a risk. It's a big risk, because now it's now in your workspace, or was in your workspace. So that's kind of a whole nother big thing in terms of just another obstacle that could be in the way in terms of slowing things down. Because maybe they were working from home. Maybe they did take all their equipment and move it, and are working from home on the expansion, and they're kind of just doing it that way. But what if, say, I got to go grab this one thing from the office to get moving? Just like a simple thing like that, like where you got to go grab one thing really quick so you can keep moving. But now you can't do that, because you can't go there at all because it's now in the office. And so like even a small thing like that, where it's like you got to run a quick errand to just go pick something up, even that is now stalled. And so overall, it's there's a lot of different things that could slow this down. And so it really just all kind of like it legitimately could happen. The fact that we have heard hardly nothing, we literally got that Direct back in January, and then we got a teensy tiny bit more in the Nintendo Direct Mini that was a little while ago that didn't really show anything more even. It just showed some extra little bits of gameplay that we hadn't seen, so we didn't really actually get any more details. So we've seen hardly nothing at all. We don't have a release date, we only have a release window, and with this stuff going on, especially the fact that a lot of the anime-related things have been delayed for Pokemon as well, like, I'm not going to guarantee it by any means, but I would absolutely prepare for the fact that the first part of the expansion could get slightly delayed. If it did get delayed, I would imagine maybe it would come out in fall, and Crown Tundra would come out in winter, because then you just push everything back one season, I guess, or a couple months, and it would still be able to get wrapped up and finished by this year, which would leave next year open. I think that would be the best case scenario. However, it might not. It might not get delayed. This is just a kind of a hypothetical discussion. There are some points that are in favor of it not getting delayed, because you've got the fact that, like I said, it's all digital, it's all download, there's nothing to go out and grab or purchase or anything like that, so it's ideal for this kind of thing. And we also don't know how far along they were, or how far along they are with the expansion right now. We do know that Shigeru Omori, the director of Pokemon Sword and Shield, said at the time that they revealed it that they had been working on it for a while at that point, but a while is kind of arbitrary. It's hard to know. We can say that the expansion is not going to be a full-on game, so it's not going to be full game size, and if they've been working on it for a while, there's probably a pretty good chance that they have a lot of it done, but it's hard to say what he means exactly by a while. Like, how far along are they truly? Because they probably did still have some work to do by the time he said that, work that eventually would get slowed down. And so ultimately it comes down to how much work was left to do at the point that things got stalled and slowed down. And could that work still be completed in that slowed down time frame in order to get this stuff up and running? Well, that's going to be the interesting thing. That is the big question, and that's what's going to be interesting to take note of throughout the rest of this month specifically, because I imagine the other interesting thing about this is that you would think if it was going to get delayed, that they would just come out and say, this is delayed. And the fact that it comes out by the end of June, we're in the middle of May, that's like, it's coming up. So if it's going to be delayed, they kind of got to say something. So that kind of is encouraging for the fact that it's not going to get delayed. But the same thing can also be said in terms of the release date. Like, the release date is basically a month and a half away. So if it's a month and a half away, you think they would tell us the actual release date. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And Game Freak has just been... They've been as quiet as they were with the actual Sword and Shield game, which is good because it obviously will allow us to go in kind of like spoiler-free or whatever. But now in this situation where there could be rumblings of delays and stuff like that, the fact that they are silent is kind of both good and bad, because it could be good in the sense that everything is good to go, so they don't need to come out and say anything, or bad in the sense that they're kind of just like bummed out and they don't want to have to come out and say it, but they know they need to, because I don't know, it could very easily go either way. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it is a 50-50 down the middle chance that it comes out on time or that it ends up delayed. I don't think it would have been delayed if this didn't happen. Like, it absolutely would have come out on time, in my opinion, if everything was as normal. But the fact that it's not normal really calls into question, especially with the timing now. We're getting up on it. We're getting closer. We haven't heard anything. All this other stuff is getting delayed. Like, it's very, very much a toss-up. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Cross our fingers that it doesn't get delayed, but ultimately we're just going to have to wait and see. That's really all we can do. And with that being said, that's about all the time I got for today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, be sure to follow wherever you are. If you're on YouTube, give it a like. Give me a comment in the comments below. Let me know what you think. And we will be back, as always, next Friday with another interesting and riveting discussion. And you can also, if you love Pokemon content and you want more, you can check me out on my channel, Hoops and Hip Hop, if you haven't already. I'd love to have you over there if you haven't visited the channel already. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great weekend, have a great week, and I will see you guys back here next Friday. With that being said, I love you, and I will smell you guys later.